Hello everyone. Helplines and care lines are open to abuse by callers who are sexually demanding, manipulative, and/or abusive. So volunteers will need to know how to handle such calls. By the end of this video, I hope you will know enough about sexually demanding, manipulative, abusive, aggressive, and/or drunk callers to be able to manage such calls when the need arises. Be able to recognize the difference between a caller with genuine sexual issues and a caller who is seeking sexual gratification over the phone. Know more about the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning plus others community and understand the issues faced by them. Callers may want to talk about a variety of sexual issues or about sexuality. For example, a caller might call regarding his inability to have an erection or his wife's high sexual drive he's unable to meet, or his liking for women's undergarments, or his urge to masturbate, or questioning his or her own sexual identity. We also receive calls from callers who might not know how to express or address their own past traumatic sexual experiences, or have unfulfilled sexual needs and wants, or were told that the topic of sex is taboo. They may then resort to talking in an inappropriate manner. For example, by describing in detail sexually explicit situations, talking about imagined sexual experiences, fantasizing themselves being raped, or masturbating on the phone for their own sexual gratification. Remember, as befrienders, we treat every call as genuine until proven otherwise. In this module, we'll share with you some telltale signs to differentiate between genuine calls relating to sexual issues or sexuality and sexually demanding calls. Sexually demanding calls can be categorized into 1. The telephone flasher, where the caller talks dirty. Example, I want to have sex with you. I want to touch your breast. Usually, there is no story attached. The caller might also ask inappropriate personal questions like, do you want to touch my penis? Or, what color panties are you wearing? Caller gets his thrill when he succeeds in shocking you to silence and unable to respond. The sexual manipulator spins a story to try to manipulate you into helping him or her masturbate by saying something like, my girlfriend has gone out and left me to babysit her little sister. If you don't help me to masturbate, I'm going to go upstairs to do it to her. The fantasy caller will describe to you in full detail, sometimes in a sexually explicit way, something that supposedly happened to them. For example, because I haven't had the operation yet, I still have my sex organ. Now, my husband's son comes and touches my penis. Sometimes I cannot control myself and allow him to do what he likes. I'm beginning to enjoy it. Who are the telephone masturbators and what makes them become one? A possibility is that they might be afflicted with telephone scatologia, literally meaning dung speech or dirty talking through the phone. This is a recognized psychosexual disorder that involves making sexually explicit, obscene telephone calls to unaware strangers to derive sexual arousal and gratification. Some researchers think it is related to exhibitionism, voyeurism, compulsive masturbation, and telephone sex addiction. Offenders are typically male, have low self-esteem, anger towards women, who feel inadequate, have problems in developing relationships, and experience feelings of isolation. The befriender's reaction of surprise, fear, upset, and anger may provide the caller with a sense of power and masculinity. Stop this video to think for a moment what some possible reasons are for people to make these sexually demanding calls to befrienders. You can list down your thoughts on a piece of paper. Why do some people make these sexually demanding calls? The caller may not see themselves as having a sex problem. Centers provide a safe, confidential, and anonymous place and are often available by telephone. Presenting problem is too painful to talk about, so the caller takes refuge in sexual demands. There is no commitment to therapy or to a course of action. Callers can break their contact with us at any time. Most of these sexually demanding calls are made by men and received by female volunteers, although this is not exclusively so. Callers who make sexually demanding calls are usually not prepared to talk about their feelings, are more interested in describing in detail or giving you a blow-by-blow description of the situation or event. They have no qualms or shame asking the befriender inappropriate sexual questions. Example, how big are your breasts? Do you enjoy having sex? Listen out for heavy breathing or soft moans, as the caller might be masturbating. But be careful you have not jumped to conclusions, because the caller might be asthmatic or have a stuffed nose. Normally, we allow the caller to end the call by hanging up before we, as a befriender, put down our receiver. However, befrienders reserve the right to end a call or withdraw our service if it is being used inappropriately. For example, when it is a sexually demanding call. However, this must be done in a professional manner. Inform the caller in a firm, neutral tone that befrienders offers emotional support to people who are suicidal or in despair. If the caller needs the service, then they are asked only to talk about their suicidal or despairing feelings. Otherwise, the contact will be ended. An appropriate response by a befriender could be, we provide emotional support to people when they are feeling suicidal or in despair. If you continue to talk in a sexually explicit manner, I shall have to end this call. This is to warn the caller to use our service appropriately. If the caller continues in the same manner, the befriender can then say, "You are abusing our line. I am ending the call now. Bye," and then put down the receiver. It is important to remember that we are never rejecting a caller. We are simply rejecting their request to help them masturbate or engage in their sexual fantasy. Remember, as a befriender, we must be professional by constantly taking the adult ego state of being calm, neutral, and rational. For example, you can say in a firm, assertive tone of voice, "We are here to provide emotional support. We cannot continue this call if you wish to masturbate. You can call us back when you are ready to talk. I am ending the call now. Bye," and then put down the receiver. If it is a regular or persistent sexual caller, keep it short and concise by saying, "You are abusing our line. I'm ending the call now. Bye." We may feel that sexually demanding calls are a poor use of our time, or we may feel angry at the amount of time taken up listening to them. We can sometimes feel used, abused, disgusted, or violated. All these reactions are understandable and can lead us to feel angry towards those who make these calls. This anger can, however, lead to an inconsistent response. We need to be consistent in our approach towards sexually demanding calls, meaning all befrienders are trained to respond in a similar, professional, and consistent manner to let the caller know that we do not entertain such calls. Likewise, we need to acknowledge how our fellow befrienders feel about receiving such calls and ensure they receive the support they need. For example, if you are affected by such calls, debrief or discuss the call with your shift mates to get things off your chest. Leave all this baggage in the center before you go home. Take a moment to think about this question. Then write your answers on a piece of paper. Pause the video when you do this activity. To better prepare ourselves to manage calls pertaining to sex, be they calls on sexuality, sexual issues, or sexually demanding calls, we ourselves must be comfortable talking about sex. If you are not, ask yourself this question. What makes you uncomfortable when talking about sex? Be honest with your answers and write them down on a piece of paper. You need not share this with anyone else. Pause this video when you do this activity. Very often, the subject of sex is taboo and not discussed openly in families. Volunteers may feel unprepared, shocked, traumatized, or violated when they receive a sexually demanding call. It helps if the volunteer is comfortable with the subject of sex or sexuality and their own body. Volunteers who have had experience of previous sexual abuse or assaults can find these types of calls difficult to handle. Ask a caller whether they are masturbating is often challenging and might be daunting for a new volunteer. Always have self-awareness of your own preconceived ideas, values, biases, and prejudices about sex. Understanding your own insecurities and hang-ups helps to make the process of dealing with callers about sex easier. It is natural for most female volunteers to suspect calls made by male callers about sexual issues to be potentially sexually demanding calls. Remember to treat every call as genuine and give the caller a chance to talk before you jump too quickly to conclusion or judge the caller incorrectly. For example, when a caller says, "I recently got married and my wife has a low sex drive that I need to masturbate several times a day, sometimes even in the office. I feel so unfulfilled. Is it natural?" One of the ways to confirm if this is a sexual caller is to explore feelings with him by asking, "Besides being unfulfilled sexually, how does it make you feel that your wife has a low sex drive?" As mentioned earlier, sexual callers usually do not talk about feelings, but are more into describing things in a sexually explicit manner. If the caller is prepared to talk about feelings, the befriender can then explore other areas. For example, by asking, "How does feeling unfulfilled affect your relationship with your wife?" Or, "How will this current situation affect you going forward?" Or, "What would you like to do about this situation?" It is important that the befriender can tell the difference between a caller with sexual issues and a sexually demanding call. Usually, a genuine caller with sexual issues is prepared to talk about feelings. Earlier in this video, I mentioned the sexual manipulator who spins a story to try to manipulate you into helping him or her masturbate by saying something like, "Your voice is so sweet that it is giving me an erection. Please continue to talk to me. Don't hang up because I'm feeling suicidal." There are also manipulative callers who are not seeking sexual gratification over the phone, but something else. They normally use deception, coercion, and trickery to get what they want and to maintain power and control in the befriender-caller relationship. They might prey on the befriender's weaknesses of fear, feeling intimidated, easily shocked, being left speechless, or inability to respond appropriately. They will succeed only if we let them get to us. If you become angry because you feel that you have been had or being deceived, be honest with yourself. Accept your feelings of shame and embarrassment for being hoodwinked or manipulated by the caller, and discuss your feelings with another befriender. Sometimes, even the most experienced befrienders are had or deceived when they were caught off guard. Manipulative callers can cause a burnout among befrienders. By taking advantage of our caring nature, send our adrenaline levels skyrocketing with false threats of suicide. Threaten us with doing harm to us or themselves if we do not meet their various demands. Insult us by comparing us to another supposedly better befriender. Resort to tears and or whining to force our compliance. Bully us with anger, hostility, foul language, or personal threats. So how do befrienders handle manipulative callers? Befriend as per normal while staying emotionally neutral when dealing with manipulative callers. Stick to befrienders' policy of not divulging internal information, whether of yourself, other befrienders, or of the center. The befriender has a right to end the call if the caller becomes aggressive, abusive, or hostile. Be firm and not give in to their threats to end their lives or harm others. Do not feel slighted when you are compared to other befrienders. Chances are the caller made it all up. If she or he is a frequent regular caller, highlight the issue to the committee and a case study will be conducted as to how to deal with this demanding manipulative caller in the future. Sometimes we receive calls from angry or abusive callers. A caller cannot be helped if she or he is angry and or abusive, nor are we expected to be the butt of their anger and abuse. Their anger or abuse is hardly ever directed at us. They are ventilating their feelings on us since the object of their anger is absent, but we are present. The befriender can reflect feelings by saying, "You sound furious, irritated, upset, and very angry. What happened to make you feel this way?" With quiet patience, we might be able to calm them. The befriender can validate feelings by saying, "Would you like to take a few deep breaths to calm down before continuing?" If the caller is still highly agitated, aggressive, and angry, ask to be excused and have them call back when they have calmed down by saying, "I shall have to excuse myself from continuing this call. When you have calmed down, you can call us again. Goodbye." Some factors that might make a person aggressive: frustration arising from a personal situation or experience. Example, problems at home, financial worries, broken relationships, work-related issues, etc. Anger over some perceived injustice or poor treatment. Anxiety about a situation as perceived by the caller, which sometimes might not be what it really is. Alcohol is a factor in many cases of violence and aggression, and often plays a significant part in incidents such as abuse, assault, road accidents, and even murder. Some legal prescription drugs used over long periods of time can predispose to aggressive behavior. Use of illegal drugs may predispose to violence either through the effects of the substance itself or through the need for money to purchase drugs. Violent outbursts during withdrawal of illegal drugs are common. Conditions of some mental illnesses may predispose to aggression or violence, and medication may cause alteration in mood and behavior. It could possibly indicate aggression when there is a change in response during a conversation. For example, a caller who spoke sadly initially about being deserted by his girlfriend gets more and more agitated about the injustice of being dumped as the conversation unfolds. Or when the caller becomes more and more restless and agitated. Caller might make persistent and aggressive demands for answers to their questions. Caller may use taunts or sarcasm and become aggressively critical of the person or people he is having issues with. Caller's voice gets louder and less in control, starts to swear and use obscene words. Caller might seek attention by saying something melodramatic or going to do something dramatic. For example, caller might say, "I'll go to her workplace and tell her colleagues what a bitch she is." Or, when she begs to crawl back into my life, I should tell her to take a hike. Here are some guidelines on how to deal with angry or abusive callers. Use the caller's name if you know it and give your SAM name. If you do not know the caller's name, offer your SAM name by saying, "By the way, I am Cindy. How do I address you?" This often prompts an exchange. Use a constant and calm tone of voice, particularly if the situation is becoming tense. Avoid false reassurances or promises that you can make things better. Be honest. Avoid getting into a debate. It is better to allow the caller to let off steam verbally without challenging him or her. Beware not to let your anxiety be expressed in a way that could challenge. Example, "What are you wasting your time for shouting at me? I can't do anything about it." When a caller is verbally abusing a volunteer, the volunteer informs the caller that their behavior is unacceptable, and if it continues, they will bring the contact to an end. The befriender can say, "The way you are behaving is unacceptable to us. If you continue to speak and behave in this rude and abusive manner, I shall have to end the call." If the abuse continues, the caller is given one more warning before the contact is politely ended. The befriender can say, "This is a final warning. If you continue to be abusive, I shall end the call immediately." Or the befriender can say, "We cannot continue the conversation in this manner. When you have calmed down, you can call us back again. I am ending the call now. Bye." We shall now go from one extreme type of call to the other extreme. Silent calls are one of the most common types of calls received at the center. We, as befrienders, must be comfortable with silence and not let the absence of speech make us feel that we must push the caller for a response. Give the caller some time and see if there is any response. Encourage the caller by telling them we are still on the line and ready to listen by saying, "I am listening. Speak when you are ready." Then let there be a pause of silence. If still no response, then say, "I am still here. Take your time." Caller will talk once they have gathered their thoughts and words. If they themselves are not ready to talk yet, they will usually hang up themselves. You might think it strange why some people call our helpline and end up not speaking at all. Some callers refuse to speak as they fear being judged, dismissed, or ridiculed. They might be unable to gather their thoughts or put their thoughts together. They might not be able to find the right words to tell their story. They do not know how to begin the conversation. They might be too ashamed or embarrassed of themselves to start talking. They might be crying silently from grief and so unable to talk. They might be calling you from a place where they are not alone. We normally greet our callers in English. If the caller is unable or not comfortable speaking in English, she or he would not respond. The caller might be looking for a particular befriender or a different gender volunteer. The sexual minority community started off with the acronym LGBT. It is now an evolving acronym of LGBTIQA+, that stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer or questioning, asexual, plus others. The explanation of some of these terms are in the resource workbook material handed out at the last module. For this video, I shall use the acronym LGBTQ+ community. There is no specific age for people to know they're LGBTQ+ and start coming out. For example, for some, they are aware they are attracted to people of the same gender as themselves from as young as 8 or 9 years of age. But they might not come out until later in life when they have come to terms with their sexuality. However, the period between knowing they're LGBTQ+ and telling others can be particularly stressful for young people. They might be confused about their feelings of attraction towards people of the same gender as themselves. This in turn can cause them to have self-doubt, feel ashamed, and or fearful because of society's acceptance of heterosexual relationships as the only normal type of intimate relationship. Acceptance and support when coming out is critical to good mental health and well-being. Friends and family, parents in particular, have a crucial role to play in supporting their children as they come out, and this support acts as a protective buffer against stresses LGBTQ+ people may encounter. Appropriate, accessible services and family support have the potential to provide vital support to young people and their families. In Malaysia, the LGBTQ+ community still face severe challenges, prejudices, and threats not experienced by non-LGBT residents because there are no LGBTQ+ rights in Malaysia. For a significant number of LGBTQ+ people, the adolescent years are a time of vulnerability for depression, self-harm, and suicidal behavior. Despite the availability of LGBTQ+ related information easily accessible through the internet, some still struggle with personal internal conflicts due to strict family upbringing and or societal norms and pressures. This in turn may slow down or stop their process of coming out and or coming to terms with their sexuality. With appropriate support and protection from minority stress, LGBTQ+ people learn to cope with minority stress. Many LGBTQ+ members of society still experience intolerance, discrimination, and inequality. Many feel they need to hide their sexuality or gender identity for fear of negative reactions from the people around them. The stigma, discrimination, harassment, and inequality cause stresses for LGBTQ+ people and place them at risk of developing mental health problems. LGBTQ plus callers should be responded to in the same way as other callers and provided with the same confidential and non-judgmental listening response. Befrienders can provide LGBTQ plus callers with enormous emotional support at times of crisis or need. By keeping an open mind and not making assumptions about callers' sexuality or gender identity, you are demonstrating to LGBTQ plus callers that they are welcome to disclose their sexuality or gender identity to you or to discuss issues related to being LGBTQ plus that may be relevant to their reasons for calling befrienders. If you think a caller is struggling to disclose their LGBTQ plus identity to you, you can support them by reassuring them that all personal information disclosed is confidential within the center and that you provide a non-judgmental service. They may be suicidal. The anxiety about sexuality may be part of the larger picture of isolation, loneliness, depression, guilt, and/or despair. Remember to ask the suicide question. Some issues affecting LGBTQ plus people are they are questioning their own sexuality or gender identity. They fear coming out or are unable to or are not wanting to come out. They lack acceptance or support from family and friends. They experience homophobic or transphobic bullying or harassment in school, their workplace, or other environments. They are exposed to negative messages about being LGBTQ+, including stigmatization, prejudice, and stereotyping. Older LGBTQ+ people may lack social support, experience isolation, and have fears about long-term placement, for example, being put into a care home. They may lose opportunities and experiences because of lack of rights and recognition. They may experience relationship crisis, which can cause conflict or domestic violence. When they live in non-urban areas or do not have long-term relationships, they may feel isolated and lonely because of the lack of contact with the LGBTQ+ community. When an LGBTQ+ person who is in a heterosexual marriage and/or cross-dressing, there will be a lot of hiding and secrecy of his or her identity. They may be exposed to harmful reparative or conversion therapy. This is a religious-based therapy that attempts to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, but has been proven to be harmful to LGBTQ+ people's mental health. Parents of LGBTQ+ children do call befrienders too. Some parents may have a harder time coming to terms with their child's disclosure. They might worry that their child may be bullied or feel a sense of loss of the assumed heterosexuality or gender of their child. They may be upset about a perceived loss of grandchildren and other aspects of what they imagine or hope for their child's future. Example, their child getting married. Most parents come to realize over time that despite the challenges LGBTQ+ people can face, most live lives that are as satisfying and fulfilling as their heterosexual and transgender brothers and sisters. To summarize, both sexually demanding and abusive callers are seeking something from our service that we are not able to offer. Explain what Befriender service is about and give the caller the opportunity to use our service appropriately. If the caller chooses not to do this, then we must accept that we are unable to help the caller on this occasion and end the call accordingly. Always remember to do this in a calm and accepting manner so that the caller feels able to contact us again if she or he ever needs emotional support. Always emotionally support your shift mate after a difficult call to allow the person to debrief and get it out of their system. Please take a moment to answer the following multiple choice questions. And if you have any doubts, review the video again. If you have any queries on this topic, please bring your questions to the face-to-face session. Thank you.